Hey, welcome to After She Left. Stay till the end and don't forget to subscribe. I was supposed to be at the lumberyard haggling over a back order of reclaimed pine, but the vendor canceled last minute. So I found myself with an extra hour and a full tank of hope, staring at my phone and thinking, maybe today's the day I do something right for once. My name is Marcus. I'm 38, live in Seattle, and I'm a mid-level architect with the kind of job that sounds fancier than it pays. I'd been married to Marissa for 9 years, and if you asked me 6 months ago how things were going, I'd have said fine, the way people say fine when they don't want to get into it. The truth? Things had gone quiet between us. Not angry, just still. So I thought I'd surprise her. There's this food truck she loves, Tariq's Mediterranean Grill, parked near her yoga studio on Pike. She always raved about their falafel. I swung by, picked up a combo plate with extra garlic sauce, and figured I'd score a couple of points by showing up early with her favorite meal. Stupid romantic, I know, but maybe it could break the ice that had been thickening between us. By the time I got to our apartment, it was nearly 4. The building was quiet. No sounds of neighbors, no barking from the schnauzer next door. Just a thick, almost unnatural silence. The minute I stepped inside, something felt off. First, the air. It wasn't empty, it was too still, too arranged, like someone had cleaned in a rush. The blinds were half drawn, but not how Marissa usually leaves them, and there was this scent, faint but sharp, not her perfume. Cologne. Something spicy and foreign. I closed the door slowly, setting the falafel on the kitchen island. That's when I saw it. A silk scarf draped over the coat rack, bright red with this floral pattern. Definitely not Marissa's. She hated scarves like that, said they felt like costumes. I stood there for a moment, holding the edge of it between my fingers, trying to make sense of what I was looking at. A guest, a friend stopping by. But that scent, I wasn't imagining it. I wandered further into the apartment, a glass on the coffee table, half full of water, still sweating with fresh condensation. Marissa doesn't drink plain water. She's a sparkling kind of girl. I touched the side of the glass. Cold. The throw blanket on the couch was folded differently. Too neat. Tucked, actually. Marissa was neat, sure, but she never tucked. I walked to the bedroom, door closed. I didn't go in. Instead, I stood there with my hand on the knob, my heart thudding in this slow, deliberate rhythm. I didn't hear anything. No voices, no movement. But the silence was loud. Deafening, even. 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind, each one worse than the last. But I wouldn't open that door. Not yet. Back in the kitchen, I unwrapped the falafel, suddenly nauseous. I sat down at the counter but couldn't bring myself to eat. I stared at the food, at the steam rising in delicate spirals, thinking how absurd it was that I thought a sandwich could fix 9 years of silence. Marissa had been distant for months, cold in this polite, effortless way that didn't scream anger but whispered disinterest. I told myself she was just tired. Work was stressful. Life was stressful. All the reasons we cling to when we don't want to face what's right in front of us. But now it all felt like a setup, like I'd stumbled into a theater just after the actors had cleared the stage. The props were still warm, but the show had already moved on without me. I glanced back at the scarf, the water glass, the folded blanket, and realized none of it was accidental. They weren't clues. They were signs. Warnings. The kind you see too late, after they've already done their damage. I didn't call her, didn't text. I just sat there, the untouched falafel getting cold beside me, wondering who had been in our home, and how long I'd been pretending not to notice. Marissa came home around 6, just as the sky turned that dull Seattle gray that makes everything look like it's been dusted with ash. I was still at the kitchen counter, the falafel long since gone cold. I hadn't moved much, just sat there, picking apart the silence and trying to stitch it back into something that made sense. I heard the lock click, then the door creaked open. "Hey," she called, her voice casual, too casual, like someone returning from a grocery run, not from wherever she'd really been. She stepped into the apartment, keys jingling, carrying her canvas tote, the one she usually reserved for yoga or Whole Foods. Her hair was down, damp at the ends like she'd showered elsewhere. She was wearing an oversized gray hoodie I didn't recognize and faded jeans. No makeup, no smile either, but not a frown. Just this weird in-between expression like she'd practiced it in the mirror. Then the smell hit me, faint but unmistakable. Cigarettes. She hadn't smoked in years. Used to scold me when I did, but now that smell clung to her clothes, subtle but cloying, like it was hiding underneath something floral. "You're home early," she said, setting her bag down near the coat rack. Her eyes didn't meet mine. "Yeah, vendor canceled. Thought I'd surprise you." I gestured toward the falafel, still sitting untouched between us. She looked at it like it was a tax notice. "Oh, that's sweet," she said, forcing a smile. "I actually already ate, though, after yoga, with Mia." Mia, her go-to alibi lately. "Cool," I said, keeping my voice even. "I figured you might be hungry." She opened the fridge, pulled out a can of sparkling water, lime, her favorite, and took a sip without turning around. "You okay?" I asked, watching her shoulders stiffen ever so slightly. "Yeah, just tired. Long class. And I left my phone in the locker, so if you texted—" "I didn't." She finally turned, leaning against the fridge with that same too casual energy, like she was trying to play a part without knowing the script. She looked at the falafel again. "You didn't eat yours?" "Lost my appetite." "Oh, I'm sorry." She said it too quickly. Too ready. Silence stretched between us, long and taut. I watched her closely, looking for tells. She didn't take off the hoodie. Didn't mention the scarf on the rack or the water glass on the table. Her eyes flicked past the living room, heck, never landing on the blanket, never acknowledging what I knew she knew I'd seen. "You smell like cigarettes," I said softly. She blinked. "Yeah, Mia's boyfriend smokes. We had dinner on her balcony." I said nothing, just nodded like that made perfect sense. Like the cologne still faint in the air wasn't there. Like the scarf wasn't hanging 2 feet away. She sat down on the arm of the couch, not the seat. Her fingers tapped nervously against her can. Then she started talking. Fast. "Oh, and if you noticed my shirt, this isn't mine. Mia gave it to me because I spilled something on mine. Soy sauce or something. It was a mess." Mia again. "Yeah," she said quickly. "She had an extra shirt in her car. Lucky." She laughed, but it was hollow. Forced. "Yeah, right?" I could see her unraveling by the minute, but not in a dramatic way. It was subtle, the kind of slow undoing you'd only notice if you were really watching. The way she kept clearing her throat, the way she didn't ask about my day, the way she still hadn't looked at the bedroom. And I realized something then. She wasn't lying to convince me. She was lying to protect the version of herself she still wanted me to believe in. The version that made mistakes, sure, but never ones like this. And maybe she thought if I didn't ask, she wouldn't have to say anything real. So I didn't. I watched her drink her water and fidget with her ring and talk about her yoga class and Mia's weird new diet and how traffic was awful on the way back. All of it in this oddly animated tone, like she was trying to fill the space with noise so I wouldn't have time to ask the one question that mattered. But I already knew the answer. She never once asked about the falafel again. She never touched it, never sat down. And when she finally said she was going to take a shower, she hesitated just slightly before heading toward the hallway, careful not to glance toward the bedroom. I sat there long after she disappeared behind the bathroom door, steam curling under the frame. I thought about how easy it would be to confront her, to lay it all out. The scarf, the cologne, the fresh glass, the strange clothes, the lies. But something stopped me. Because I knew if I asked, she'd lie again, and I didn't want to catch her in another one. I wanted to see how long she could pretend nothing was wrong, because sometimes silence says more than shouting ever could. And in that moment, I realized we were both pretending. Me, that I didn't already know. Her, that she hadn't already lost me. The next morning, I didn't go to work. I emailed my supervisor, told him I needed a personal day, and then turned off my phone. I didn't even give a reason. I just needed space, real space. The kind that didn't have walls that held old conversations and silent betrayals. Marissa had already left by then. She didn't say goodbye, just rustled around quietly, made a bit more noise than necessary, like she wanted credit for trying not to wake me. Then the front door closed with that soft click that didn't sound like much, but still managed to echo. I lay in bed for a while, staring at the ceiling, my arm behind my head, running over everything from the night before. I kept hearing her voice, cheerful and clipped, watching her sidestep every question that wasn't even asked. And I kept seeing that scarf, red, floral, not hers. I got up eventually and made coffee. It'd go cold on the counter while I walked the length of the apartment, every room pressing in on me. The place looked normal, Same hardwood floors, same neutral walls, same plants she'd half forgotten to water but always insisted on keeping. But nothing felt normal anymore. So I sat down at the kitchen table with a notebook and a pen, something I hadn't used in years, and started writing down the things I'd missed. The things that didn't make sense before but now stood out like neon signs. The password change. It started back in November. She changed her phone password for security, she said. I remember joking about it. Planning a heist or something? She laughed. No, just being careful. Work told us to update our passcodes. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? Solo laundry days. At first, I thought she was just being efficient, doing her laundry separate from mine, folding it when I wasn't around. But now I remembered the times she'd snapped when I tossed my shirt into the basket with hers. I just washed everything. Come on, Marcus. Seemed small then, just a quirk. Now I saw it for what it was, a habit of someone hiding things, washing the scent out before it lingered. The new perfume. A few months ago, I noticed it. Not the brand she used to wear, lighter, sweeter. I asked her about it once. Oh, just a sample from the spa, she'd said. Figured I'd try something new. She didn't wear it for me. Her phone, always face down, notifications off. It used to buzz constantly. Now it was silent, as if it lived in another world she didn't want me to see. Sometimes she'd leave it behind when we went out, something she never did before. Once I saw her reading a message, smiling. When she noticed me watching, she flipped it face down and said, "Just a meme from Mia." Mia. Always Mia. The boutique receipt. Last month, I found it by accident. A paper receipt in her coat pocket from a boutique in Capitol Hill. Expensive lingerie. I never saw it, never even knew she bought it. When I asked about it, she said it was a gift for a friend's bridal shower. She didn't go to any bridal shower. I flipped to a fresh page in the notebook, wrote down the word touch and underlined it. That's what had vanished first. Not completely, but slowly, subtly, like when she'd pull away first during hugs, or when I'd rest my hand on her thigh while watching TV and she'd shift slightly, not in rejection, just absence. She used to lean into me when we sat together. Now she always left a cushion between us. Then there was the sex, or the lack of it. I couldn't remember the last time we made love without it feeling like something scheduled. Quick, quiet, dutiful, no warmth, no spark, just an obligation we both endured. And I'd ignored it, convinced myself it was just marriage. That after so many years, intimacy faded, that this was the rhythm of long-term love. But that was a lie, too. One I told myself because I didn't want to ask the harder question. What if it wasn't fading? What if she was just giving it to someone else? I closed the notebook and sat there for a long time, elbows on the table, fingers pressed against my lips. How had I missed all of this? The signs were everywhere. I hadn't seen them because I didn't want to. Because noticing meant facing the truth. And the truth? That meant change. It meant confrontation. It meant losing her. And I think deep down, I knew I'd already lost her. I just wasn't ready to admit it. I spent the rest of the day walking the neighborhood in a daze. Saw a couple arguing outside a coffee shop. A teenage girl laughing too hard into her phone. A man in a suit tripping on a curb and laughing at himself. The world kept moving, unaware, unconcerned. And I realized everything I thought I was building, holding on to, preserving, it wasn't real anymore. Not the connection, not the comfort, not the marriage. All that remained was the shell of what used to be us. And now even that was beginning to crack. It was Friday when she told me about the birthday party. She said it casually over dinner, takeout from some trendy Thai place she used to call Too Salty. Now apparently it was her favorite. She sat across from me at the table, legs folded neatly, scrolling her phone with one hand while stabbing at noodles with the other. "Oh, I'll be staying at Hannah's tomorrow night," she said mid-bite. It's her coworker's birthday, kind of a girls' thing. They're doing this backyard wine tasting / bonfire thing out in Kirkland. I blinked. Kirkland? Yeah, she said, too fast. She's house-sitting for this guy she works with. Super nice place. He's out of town, I think, so we're just using the yard, nothing crazy. It was the way she said it, too many details, like a student reciting lines for a school play. She even smiled between words, like she knew how rehearsed it sounded, and was hoping charm would smooth it over. She kept eating, eyes still on her phone. Didn't notice I hadn't picked up my fork. "You staying the whole night?" "Yeah," she said, not looking up. Probably easier that way. Might be some drinking. Safer not to drive, you know? Right. She offered a tight smile. I'll text you if plans change. Plans weren't going to change. The second she walked into the bedroom that night, I knew I wasn't letting it go. I didn't argue. I didn't accuse. I just waited. Patient. Deliberate. Let her pack an overnight bag like it was any other weekend. Let her give me a soft kiss on the cheek like nothing had ever changed. But by then, everything had. She left around 6:30 the next day. Said she was meeting Hannah at the light rail and then they'd head over together. I watched her pull out of the parking garage in her Prius, waited 2 minutes, then grabbed my keys. Kirkland isn't big. Hannah had mentioned her new job once, some boutique architecture firm out near Market Street. I remembered the name. I pulled it up on my phone, scanned through recent tag locations on social media, and there it was. A story posted barely 5 minutes ago. Marissa, holding a wine glass, smiling too wide. The caption said, "Cheers to the weekend," but the location wasn't tagged. I paused the video. The house behind her was modern, wood-paneled, floor-to-ceiling windows, and I recognized the style, one of those newer hillside homes above the waterfront. Maybe 6 or 7 of them with that exact layout. Built by the same firm, probably the same architect I'd heard her mention once, maybe twice in passing. A guy named Nathan, or Nolan. Something like that. I drove, took the long way across the 520 bridge past the marina and climbed the neighborhood slowly, watching each house number as it passed. Then I saw it. The lights were on, warm and soft behind the glass, music low and tasteful, drifting through a speaker system built into the deck. The backyard was lit by Edison bulbs strung from the fence to the trees. There were chairs arranged near a fire pit, an open bottle of wine on the patio table. And Marissa. She wasn't with Hannah. She was with him. Tall, well-dressed, maybe mid-40s. The kind of guy who drinks wine slowly and talks with his hands. They were sitting close, too close for coworkers. She was laughing. Not polite chuckles, but the kind that wrinkled her nose and made her whole body lean in. He touched her knee at one point. She didn't move. Instead, she scooted closer. Then she climbed onto his lap. It wasn't frantic or sloppy. It was familiar, practiced, the kind of closeness that only comes from repetition. She ran her fingers along the back of his neck, leaned in, and kissed him. Slow, like she belonged there. I didn't flinch, didn't blink. I just stood across the street inside the safety of my car, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly I thought it might crack. I watched for another minute, long enough to know it wasn't a mistake, not a misunderstanding, not a moment of bad judgment. This was it, the truth. There was no speech, no confrontation, no shouting across lawns or banging on doors. I just put the car in gear and drove away, quiet, stone-faced, empty. Because the thing about betrayal is, it doesn't scream when it hits you. It doesn't show up with fireworks or accusations. It walks in silently, makes itself at home, and waits for you to finally notice it's been living there all along. And now I had seen it. No more questions, no more suspicion, only truth, only silence. I got home just before midnight. The apartment was exactly as we'd left it. Still, quiet, holding the kind of calm that only comes after something breaks. The lights were off, but I didn't bother turning them on. I moved through the place like a visitor, not touching anything I didn't have to. Just observing. Her scarf still hung on the coat rack like some kind of souvenir from a lie. The glass on the table still had faint rings of condensation. The throw blanket sat on the couch in its unfamiliar, overfolded arrangement. The place was full of small details screaming a truth she'd hoped I wouldn't hear. But I had heard it, and I couldn't unhear it now. I walked into the bedroom. Her side of the closet was still half open, like she'd rushed to grab something earlier. A couple of hangers clinked softly against each other. Her perfume lingered in the air, faint and almost nostalgic. I stood there for a long time, not angry, not even sad, just tired. Not the kind of tired you sleep off. The kind of tired that settles into your bones, makes your chest feel heavier, makes everything feel like it's happening underwater. I sat on the edge of the bed, reached for my left hand, twisted the wedding band slowly, like I was trying to remember what it used to mean. Then I slipped it off. No ceremony, no big gesture, just a quiet motion. A small, deliberate choice that felt bigger than it looked. I held the ring in my palm, turned it over. It caught the streetlight through the window, glinting faintly in the dark. It was a plain band. Simple. We'd picked it out together 9 years ago. I remembered how excited she was, how she laughed and made me try on 3 different sizes until she said, "That's the one. That looks like you." And now it didn't look like me at all. I placed it on her pillow. Dead center. The sheet had the faintest crease from where she'd slept the night before. I didn't smooth it out. I wanted her to see it. I didn't leave a note, didn't say a word. She didn't deserve a message to twist or ignore. I wanted the silence to do the talking. It said everything. I packed a single duffel bag, bare essentials, a few shirts, jeans, socks, my toothbrush. I didn't take much, just what I needed to disappear for a while. I grabbed my wallet, my keys, left my phone on the nightstand, not as a threat, not to make her wonder, but because I didn't want her to reach me. Not through texts, not through missed calls, not through carefully crafted apologies or frantic explanations. She would walk in, see the ring, and know, and I wouldn't be there to hear her excuses. I looked around the apartment one last time. Our life, frozen in time. Framed photos on the hallway shelf, a chipped coffee mug on the counter, the dried eucalyptus she kept in a vase by the window. It all looked so normal, but it wasn't. It hadn't been for a long time, and now I wasn't pretending anymore. I closed the door behind me gently. No slamming, no drama, just a dull click. The sound of something ending. I walked down the stairs, out into the cool night air. The city was quiet, the streets half empty, the kind of night where everything feels like it's holding its breath. I got in my car, started the engine, and pulled away. No plan, no destination, just forward. The goodbye had already happened. And I didn't need to hear hers. By morning, I was halfway to nowhere. I'd driven through the night with no GPS, no music, just the soft hum of the engine and the weight of everything I didn't want to think about. Around 7 a.m., I pulled off the highway and found myself at the base of a 2-lane road winding into the mountains. The sign read, "Clearwater Ridge Lodge, vacancies welcome." It looked like it hadn't been updated since the 90s. Faded paint, a lopsided welcome sign, and an old neon open light buzzing faintly in the window of the main office. I parked, grabbed my bag, and walked inside. A tired woman in her 60s sat behind the counter flipping through a paperback novel. She looked up, gave me a slow nod. "You look like someone who doesn't want questions," she said. "I'm just looking for a room." "Cash or card?" "Cash." She gave me a key. Room 4. I didn't ask what the difference was. I just took it and walked out. The room was simple, wood-paneled walls, twin lamps, a creaky queen-size bed, and a small balcony facing the woods. No TV, no Wi-Fi, just a worn copy of Reader's Digest on the nightstand, and a silence so deep it made my ears ring. It was perfect. For the first few days, I didn't do much. Woke up early, took walks, got coffee at the diner 2 miles up the road where no one asked where I was from or why I was alone. They just poured hot coffee into ceramic mugs and slid eggs across the counter like they'd been doing it for 100 years. At night, I sat on the balcony with a blanket around my shoulders and watched the stars, more of them than I'd seen in years. I didn't feel peace exactly. But I didn't feel chaos either, just space. I needed space, not just from Marissa, but from who I had become around her. I started thinking more clearly up there, in that dusty mountain town. Without the constant noise of my phone, without her footsteps echoing through the apartment, without the weight of her silence pressing against my chest, I began to remember myself. Not the husband, not the architect, just Marcus. I thought about the man I used to be before everything became about maintenance, keeping up appearances, keeping the marriage stable, keeping my doubts quiet, before love turned into duty and duty turned into routine. And I thought about how long I'd been shrinking, silently, trying to make room for someone who no longer noticed me. There was a moment, 3 days in, when I caught myself doing something that felt ridiculous. I was brushing my teeth and suddenly froze mid-motion, expecting to hear her behind me, a sigh, a question, a casual judgment disguised as small talk. But there was nothing. Just me, alone. And for the first time in a long while, the absence didn't scare me. It felt clean, empty, yes, but honest. I stopped waiting for my phone to light up, stopped checking the shadows in my mind for her face. I started talking to myself, quietly, like I was learning how to be my own company again. On the 5th night, I wrote a letter. Not to send, just to write. You lied. But the real betrayal wasn't the affair. It was making me feel like a stranger in my own home, like I was an obligation you couldn't wait to be rid of. I don't hate you. I'm just done trying to fix something you quietly broke while I wasn't looking. I folded it up, tore it into strips, and dropped the pieces off the edge of the balcony. The next morning, I didn't feel lighter, but I didn't feel numb either. I just felt real. By the end of the week, I knew I wasn't going back, not because I was running away, but because I'd already arrived. This wasn't escape, it was a return to myself, to silence that felt earned, to solitude that didn't feel lonely. The betrayal had stopped bleeding, and now I was learning how to live without bandages. It was Walt who gave me the job. I'd been eating breakfast at the diner every morning for nearly 2 weeks. Same stool, same black coffee, same quiet nod to the regulars who never asked why I was there alone. Walt was the guy who sat 2 seats down from me most mornings. Older, built like a refrigerator, with hands that looked like they'd been carved out of wood. One morning, I noticed the deep groove of sawdust under his nails. Same flannel shirt, same faded jeans. The kind of man who said little but noticed everything. "You any good with your hands?" he asked out of nowhere, without even looking at me. I blinked. "I'm an architect," he chuckled. "So, a guy who tells other people what to build," I smirked. "That's not inaccurate." He sipped his coffee. "I need someone to help around the shop. Nothing fancy. Sanding, hauling, fixing things. You offering me a job? I'm offering you something to do besides sitting in that chair looking like your whole life just folded in half." I didn't hesitate. "When do I start?" "Now." The shop was just down the road, a squat building tucked behind a row of pine trees, with a crooked sign that read Walt's Workshop. Inside smelled like cedar, varnish, and history. Tables were scattered with tools, sawdust, and half-finished furniture pieces that looked like they came from another decade. I didn't tell Walt much. He didn't ask. He handed me a set of gloves and pointed to a pile of warped dining chairs. "These need love. You know what that means?" "Not yet." "You'll learn," and I did. Every day after that, I woke up with purpose. Not obligation, not dread, just purpose. I'd walk to the shop, spend 8 hours sweating over bent nails, cracked wood, uneven legs. I didn't check my email. I didn't scroll through news. I didn't wonder what Marissa was doing. I just worked. And there was something about working with my hands again, about transforming something broken into something whole that helped stitch me back together too. Walt didn't say much, but he taught me everything, showed me how to listen to the wood, how to fix without replacing, how to sand with patience instead of force. "You rush," he'd say, tapping the edge of a frame. "That's not fixing, that's hiding." He wasn't just talking about chairs. One night after the shop closed, I stayed behind. There was this old cabinet in the corner, warped frame, cracked glass, hinges rusted through. It reminded me of something we used to have in our first apartment, back when things with Marissa were still soft and new, when we thought mismatched dishes and secondhand furniture were charming, not embarrassing. I spent 3 nights on it, stripping the paint, replacing the glass, staining it by hand. I didn't even realize what I was doing until I stepped back and looked at it. It wasn't a cabinet anymore. It was a reminder that I still knew how to rebuild. Not just furniture. Myself. The more I worked, the less I thought about the apartment, about the betrayal, about her. The space in my mind she used to occupy started filling with other things. The rhythm of sanding, the smell of fresh wood glue, the simple pride of getting something level without needing to measure twice. I stopped counting days, stopped waiting for closure, because the truth was, I already had it. It wasn't a conversation. It wasn't an apology. It was this. Me, in a small-town workshop, covered in dust, heart still bruised but beating on its own terms again. Walt caught me staring out the window one morning, coffee in hand, hands scuffed from work. Thinking about going back? I shook my head. No. Good. He didn't say anything else. He didn't have to. Because this quiet, stubborn, unremarkable little life wasn't about escape anymore. It was about choosing myself. Not in theory. Not in some performative self-help kind of way, but in a real, grounded, day-after-day kind of way. I wasn't healed, but I was healing. And for now, that was enough. It had been almost 2 months. No texts, no calls, no emails, not a single attempt from Marissa, not until the envelope arrived at the workshop. It was a Friday. Walt had gone home early, and I was in the back, fixing a drawer that wouldn't close flush. I heard the bell over the door ring, footsteps, then silence. When I came out front, the place was empty, but on the counter sat a white envelope. No return address. Just my name, written in that familiar slanted cursive. I stared at it for a while before I opened it. My hands didn't shake. I wasn't nervous. Inside was a letter. 2 pages, written in black ink. Marcus, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, and maybe you never will. But I had to try. I made a mistake, a big one. And I lied to you. About a lot of things. You were always steady, always kind, and I took advantage of that. I thought I could keep my mistakes separate from you, like different drawers that never touched. But they did. And I see that now. He meant nothing. I know that sounds pathetic, but it's the truth. Well, it was real. It mattered to me. You mattered to me. I don't know where you are. I don't know if this will even reach you. But if it does, please come home. Marissa, I read it once, then again, then folded it neatly and slid it back into the envelope. Walt walked in 5 minutes later, wiping his hands on a rag. He saw me holding the letter. Bad news? No, I said, setting it on the counter. Just wrong address. He gave me a look, one that didn't press for more. That was Walt's gift. He never demanded an explanation. He just stood beside the truth until you were ready to say it out loud. We didn't speak about it. Not that day. Not the next. But something shifted after that. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't closure. It was confirmation. She had noticed the absence, not through a dramatic breakup or a screaming match, but through what I'd taken with me when I left. Her power. Her hold on me. I hadn't just walked out. I'd canceled insurance, disconnected shared services, paused the credit card she always used for groceries and wine. I'd closed the bank account she forgot was even in my name. No fight. No warning. Just gone. And that silence did more damage than any confrontation ever could. She didn't know where I was. She couldn't twist the story into something softer for her friends. She couldn't say, I overreacted, because I didn't react. I simply disappeared from her life with the same quiet precision she'd used to fade from mine. I thought about her sometimes, sure. Not with longing, but with curiosity. I'd wonder how she explained it to people, what version she told them, how she framed her narrative. I didn't care, because the longer I stayed in the mountains, the more I realized I didn't miss her. I didn't even miss our life. I missed who I used to be before I started shrinking to keep the peace. Before I convinced myself that loyalty meant staying, even when I was invisible. Now I woke up each morning to the sound of pine needles in the wind. I made my own coffee. I read books at night. I fixed broken chairs. I talked to Walt about things that didn't need fixing. It was simple, quiet, real, and she had no access to it. A few weeks after the letter, Walt asked if I wanted to stay on longer, full time. Said there was a room above the shop that needed work, but could be mine if I wanted it. I said yes without hesitation, not because I had nowhere else to go, but because, for the first time, I wasn't running. I was choosing, not revenge, not distance, but silence, and the kind of peace that doesn't beg to be understood. It was the barista at the cafe who told me. I'd been stopping there most mornings, trading sawdust for the smell of espresso. Her name was Holly. Mid-20s, always remembered my order, black coffee, 2 sugars. We never talked much beyond pleasantries. But that morning, she lingered. You're Marcus, right? I paused, halfway to my seat. Yeah, she looked sheepish. I think I met someone who knows your wife, or ex-wife. That word hung in the air for a second longer than necessary. I didn't correct her. Holly went on. Some woman came in the other day, friend of Marissa's. She was talking about the wedding ring you left behind. My hands stilled. What about it? She said Marissa kept it. Holly gave a small shrug. Still has it on her nightstand. Said she hasn't moved it. Not once. Not since the day you left. I didn't say anything, just nodded once and sat down. Later, at the shop, I found myself replaying Holly's words. Not because they hurt, but because they didn't. She kept the ring, not because it meant something to her, but because it didn't let her control the story. That tiny circle of gold left carefully on her pillow had become the one thing she couldn't explain away. She could lie about the affair, pretend it was a misunderstanding, tell people I overreacted or needed space. But that ring, that was a scar, one she had to look at every day. I pictured it sitting there, undisturbed, not because she missed me, but because she couldn't rewrite it. It was too clear, too quiet, too final. I thought about everything I hadn't said to her when I left, how I hadn't yelled, how I hadn't demanded answers, how I hadn't asked why, because by then none of it would have mattered. I already knew the truth, and so did she. That silence, it had become my greatest act of self-respect. She'd spent years shaping the narrative, curating our life like one of her boutique yoga Instagram posts. Filtered, symmetrical, performative. I was just a prop, a steady presence to fill in the background. Until I wasn't. Until I stripped away the script, walked off the stage, and left her with nothing but the reality she didn't want to face. I didn't do it to punish her. I did it because drama was her language, and silence, that was mine. She couldn't argue with it, couldn't spin it, couldn't dismiss it. And the best part, she would never get closure because I didn't need to explain myself. Not anymore. That night, I sat on the porch above the shop, legs stretched out, watching the last light drain from the sky. The mountain air was sharp, clean, honest. I thought about the version of me who used to believe in forever, the one who brought home falafel to save a failing marriage, the one who mistook silence for peace, who kept giving and giving, hoping it would be enough. I missed him, but not because he was better. I missed him because he tried, because he believed. And I realized something. I don't hate Marissa. I don't even feel betrayed anymore. What I feel is this strange, quiet gratitude, because without her silence, I never would have found my own. Without her betrayal, I never would have chosen myself. And without that ring sitting untouched on her pillow, I might have kept waiting for someone to see me. Now I know better. I see me. And that's the only version of closure I'll ever need. The mornings came easier now. I had a routine, not rushed, not crammed between emails or arguments or watching someone else pull away. Just simple, steady things. Coffee at sunrise made on a cheap drip machine upstairs from the workshop. 2 eggs, toast, no phone. Then a quiet walk to the lakeside trail that wrapped behind the ridge like an old secret. I'd sit on a bench carved into the hillside, sip what was left in my mug, and watch the fog lift off the water like it had somewhere better to be. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for anything. No calls, no apologies, no closure, just stillness. Walt still let me work at the shop. He didn't ask questions when I stayed late or came in early. We'd sand in silence or argue about glue brands or take turns fixing the same damn rocking chair that nobody wanted, but neither of us could throw away. We never said it out loud, but I think we both understood. Some things are worth mending, even when they don't belong to anyone anymore. One afternoon, a young couple came in asking about a custom table. She was pregnant, and he kept rubbing the back of his neck like he was terrified of screwing everything up. While Walt went over specs with them, I stepped outside. I stood there in the gravel lot, watching the wind push the pine trees around like they didn't care who was watching. And I thought, not about Marissa, but about how strange it is that pain fades without you noticing. Not all at once, not like a switch, but like background noise getting quieter. One day, you just wake up and it isn't the first thing you feel. And that absence, it's not numbness, it's peace. I never went back for my things. Never called to check if she donated my jackets or thrown out the mugs we bought in Portland. None of it mattered. The ring was still with her from what I'd heard. Good. Let it sit there. Let it say the thing I never had to. I didn't carry symbols anymore. I carried stillness. Wood grain under my palms, the sound of sandpaper on oak, the scent of varnish, soft and clean. I carried mornings without dread, and the quiet certainty that I hadn't escaped anything. I'd arrived. On my birthday, midweek, unannounced, I got a card in the mail. No return address. Just a plain envelope with my name in block letters. Inside, a postcard of the Cascade Range and one line written in careful script, "I hope you're happy." I stared at it for a second, then smiled. Folded it in half, tossed it in the stove with the rest of the workshop kindling. Because I am. Not in the dramatic, new life, brand new me kind of way, but in the way that's small, durable, real. Because I don't need someone to come back. I don't need the past to feel fair. I don't need the ring, the apartment, or the apology. I just need the bench by the lake, the feel of wood in my hands, and quiet truth that this ordinary, patient-free life is mine. And that's enough. That's home.